Tony Jones, in our humble opinion, is one of the most respected beat writers who covers the Utah Jazz. Honestly, if you're a fanatic like us and don't know who TJ is, you should probably start to reevaluate your life decisions. Tony recently reported on a podcast the Utah Jazz had a trade that actually fell through. Why is this significant? Well, we know that the Utah Jazz wanted Mikal Bridges, his brother Miles, and even went as far as to make an offer on DeJounte Murray. But what the Utah Jazz got back in return after the trade deadline was just more draft capital for KO and Ochai Agbaji. Now, Tony Jones refused to give a name, and that's obviously due to him wanting to maintain trust with his sources. I mean, can we really blame him for that? I can't. And honestly, neither should you. What he did do, though, was leave us a nice little trail of breadcrumbs that we could speculate and follow. We know for a fact that he wasn't a star, but this player was better than a starter and completely off the grid. We also know, as reported by Tony Jones, that Jordan Clarkson's future with the Jazz is very limited, and they could be getting divorced sooner rather than later. Okay, well, we know thanks to Andy Larson that DeJounte Murray was on the board for the Jazz, and they did make an actual offer on him. But because of limited details, it's really hard to tell how serious that offer was. So let's look at the facts here. When I think of players that are completely off the grid using the criteria that Tony Jones gave us, and also considering players that are not necessarily stars, but better than starters, two players come to mind, and that is Brandon Ingram and LaMelo Ball. Now, hear me out on this. Both of these guys would be completely out of left field for the Jazz, meeting the criteria we're looking at. They're not exactly superstars, but these guys are definitely better than starters. And both of them would help catapult the Utah Jazz really into playoff contention and possibly further. And ultimately, that's what the Utah Jazz are trying to accomplish with their front office. We definitely know, thanks to Andy Larson, that is the goal of Lauri Markkanen, who really wants to make the playoffs. And by the way, is just as pissed off as you are that we probably won't be making the playoffs this year. So that kind of begs the question, which is really sitting on everyone's mind. What player were the Utah Jazz trying to obtain? All right, so JD, let me know. What player do you think the Utah Jazz were trying to obtain?
You know, Doc, I think that it's pretty interesting the fact that Tony Jones is trying to say it was a little bit out of left field. Like you had mentioned, Mikal Bridges is a guy that I would have originally thought because there were reports about it, but no, it's out of left field, which means it was probably under a lot of radars, probably wasn't in a lot of reports. So LaMelo Ball and Ingram are really interesting
because of Tony Jones, and he won't even give us a name.
I think I want to say that Ingram. Well, I want to analyze Ingram and Ball for a sec, and then I've got a couple people that I think it could be. Okay. I think what you really have to be weighing here, Doc, is would the other team be willing to do it too? You know, you could say, oh, Luka Doncic maybe, but it's like, no. Why would the Mavs want to give up such an incredible player? It has to be something that, you know, could potentially be failing, or that maybe the team could be thinking of moving on. With Ingram, the Pelicans are good. What could the Jazz offer in return that the Pelicans might want? I mean, the Pelicans are kind of winning right now, but Ingram definitely fits that build that we're describing. So I don't know. I would give that like a possibility, like maybe Tony Jones was referring to him, but I don't know why the Pelicans would do it. I don't think they're really caring about draft stock right now. For LaMelo Ball,
they do have quite a bit of draft capital left over from the AD trade, but when we think about players that are out of left field, we have to understand the criteria too, that the Utah Jazz are one of 11 teams that own over 75% of all of the draft capital within the NBA today. Okay, other teams within that 11 are the Pelicans. You have OKC. OKC's in there. You have us. there are other teams as well. But look, the point I'm trying to make is the Utah Jazz have enough draft capital to buy technically whatever player they want because of the stronghold that they have. So that's why even if you have a player like Brandon Ingram, like if the offer's too good to refuse, you're probably going to give up that player.
Now, here's the thing, Doc. There's a certain degree to which this is true. But in reality, there are certain players that it does not matter how many pieces of draft capital you give to that team, they're not going to trade them. Exhibit A is Victor Wembanyama. We could trade 10 first rounds for Victor, and I don't think the Spurs would do it. I don't think they'd be willing to do it. With Ingram, you'd probably have to give a heavy load, but he wasn't in any trade talks. We don't hear anything. I think that he fits the mold of, like, he's a very good player, which is, he's a very good player, but he's not necessarily continuing all-star caliber, but he's very good. Maybe somebody like Lauri Markkanen level. And
I think Lowry's better than Brandon.
Maybe. But I think that I don't know if the Pelicans would want anything. They're trying to win now. They're trying to develop this core, which includes Ingram.
Right.
I think,
but if the Utah Jazz offer you, let's say 3 first-round draft picks and then 2 pick swaps, you're really going to say no to
I don't know because
I just don't.
They're winning right now.
Because
they want to see what they can do right now with their team. They're in the playoffs. They're going to want to try and build
up. Assumption, though, that's what we're assuming. Like
that they're in the playoffs.
That they wouldn't want to make any big moves, but honestly, like,
why would they? Who just for draft capital?
Listen,
that'd be
JD,
wasting Zion.
We heard from Woj and Shams that Golden State contacted the Lakers about LeBron James during the deadline. Like, regardless of how we as fans feel about these players, everyone is for sale. That's how it works in terms of sports trades, man. And like, if you make an offer that's too sweet to say no to, like, you're going to pull the trigger, man. You really are. Like, if you have Golden State contacting the Lakers, they're one of their main rivals, saying, "What do you want for LeBron James?" Like, every player's for sale, man, unless they got a no trade clause. And that brings me to this next point too. LaMelo Ball. One of the reasons I feel like this really makes sense is because they just Michael Jordan essentially just sold the team. They're under new ownership, and what do we know about new owners? They clean house. They always start cleaning house. What did Ryan Smith do? He cleaned house, besides like Justin Zanuck. He kept him. He sent everyone else packing. Actually, Dennis Lindsey, actually. My bad. Dennis Lindsey got fired. Or he stepped down, however you want to say that. And then Justin Zanuck took over. So even Ryan Smith completely cleaned house. That's very normal, I think, when you have a new owner. And so I could see something like that occurring, especially with the emergence of Brandon Miller, who definitely is like rookie of the year material. And I actually we have to circle back on that, dude, because I was listening to Zach Lowe's podcast, and he made a great point about Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren, and how Chet Holmgren in any other year would be rookie of the year over the past like decade, and that speaks volumes about how good that draft class was, which is what you and I reported. But full circle, maybe if you are the owners of the Hornets, you're looking at trying to just build around Brandon Miller, and you got him early enough to where your timeline really isn't going to be changing. So why not trade off LaMelo Ball for as much assets as possible?
Yeah. I think that's one of the more interesting ones. I think one could easily argue that LaMelo, they would want to be building with LaMelo for the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I think LaMelo's kind of a risk. He's been injury prone, just like his brother, unfortunately. It seems like last year he was injured for a large portion, and now this year, maybe they would try and save face by getting a lot of draft capital for him, and maybe the hopes of if Charlotte were to trade somebody like LaMelo Ball, the hopes would be, well, he might be injury prone continuing on, and maybe we can just get a lot of draft capital out of it. So that is one of the more interesting ones. I don't know if Charlotte would do it because he's kind of the face of the organization, but like you said,
well, he is now.
Maybe they're on full rebuild mode. Maybe Brandon Miller is the new guy. They're starting to win now a little bit too. But
they've been on quite the tear since they picked up. I always forget this guy's name. He was the power forward for Boston. They traded him to
Grant
the Mavs.
Williams.
Huh?
Grant Williams.
Grant Williams. Yeah, ever since Grant has come to their team, he's really helped improve their system quite a bit. He's coming off the bench and he's killing it for him.
Yeah. I would say it. So I really liked the LaMelo Ball. I think Ingram's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I think another likely one, although we have heard a little bit in some speculation world that Tyler Hero might have been one that the Jazz wanted to seek and go after. Mm-hmm. But I think that he could have been one that perhaps fits the timeline of this Jazz rebuild, who's a very good player, but maybe not a star player that maybe the Jazz were interested in. We know that the Miami Heat in this previous offseason was potentially trying to give up Tyler Hero to get Damian Lillard. Yes. So he was available. He still might be available. They might be willing to move off of him. I think that might be the guy. What do you think about that, Doc?
Yeah, I can see that. I think Tyler Hero, like you said, he fits the timeline. He's better than a starter. He's not an all-star. He's not a star. Definitely not a superstar. I could see that, yeah. Depending on what they're asking for, too, because I think the price for Tyler Hero should not be that high. But honestly, we know how the trade deadline gets. Everyone starts asking for everything. I mean, you have Washington asking for what, like 2 first-round draft picks for Kyle Kuzma? Like, you want a first-rounder for Tyus Jones? Like, stop it. Like, everyone always flexes during the trade deadline. It's ridiculous. I have a fun one for you, man. What about D Fox of Sacramento?
Again, why would Sacramento even be willing to do this? They're winning right now. They want to see how far they can go.
I think they're sitting down at 7 or 8 right now. They're really not doing too hot. But D Fox also meets our criteria. That's why this game is so much fun. We have all these breadcrumbs that we can try to follow, but like we really have no idea. D Fox, we know that he is way better than a starter. But he just can't make an all-star team, which is crazy to me. Sabonis is the same way better than a starter. Both of them are like all NBA talents. I think they were. I know Sabonis was last year, right?
Sabonis I think it was.
The fact that they didn't make the all-star game is out of control and shows that entire system needs to be overhauled. But once again, like I refer to the point that no player is untouchable. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say. Because
it's not.
There are very, very, very few players that are actually untouchable.
Okay, so you just outright said there are some untouchables, right?
Yeah, there's like 3 of them.
I don't think there's just like when you say untouchable, yes, you could trade an entire team for a player and get him. But I'm thinking really realistically. I don't think the Sacramento Kings are even thinking about trading De'Aaron Fox. I don't think they would even be willing to unless you give them like 10 draft picks, and then you can't refuse something like that. But I don't think Ainge is in the type of area where you want to do something like that.
But you agree, like every player theoretically is for sale when it comes to trades.
But realistically, no. I think if you actually look at the Kings,
less than
think they're going to go far.
Of the NBA is untouchable. Less than 5, easy.
That
would be 20 guys.
We both agreed this earlier in the season that we thought that the Sacramento Kings are going to make the second round and potentially farther.
Yes.
Why would they be giving their star player to the Jazz?
Because of how their performance is. right
It
now.
really is not. I mean, it's a minor stint. If it's over the span of a few years, then maybe they might start thinking about doing some type of rebuild. That's all the Jazz can give is rebuilding material, unless they want to give Lauri Markkanen.
Yes.
Why would the Sacramento Kings want to rebuild when they have Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, and a Keegan Murray who's a rising star?
The amount of draft capital that the Utah Jazz can offer, and not just that, but like really good rotational pieces, is better like than any other team in the NBA besides like OKC. The Magic could probably put together like a crazy package. The Pelicans could if they wanted to. But I would argue that those players are still not as valuable as the Utah Jazz players. This team is literally constructed of like everyone, all role players. Okay. And that's not a slight on our team because of the resurgence and emergence of Lauri Markkanen. But look, everyone else on this team is a high-end role player. KO Ochai is pretty good on defense. He never really found his stroke in terms of offense. But Simone Fontecchio, John Collins, I mean, like, dude, even Walker Kessler, like all of these, we have like Chris Dunn. Chris Dunn is one of the greatest perimeter defenders right now currently in the NBA. Like, and honestly, Chris Dunn should be in the talk for Defensive Player of the Year. And the fact that he's not, I think, is a travesty. No, he is. He's the best guard defender on the planet. In terms of like a guard who can position, he is better than Marcus Smart. He proved that this year. Like, he's the best guard defender on the planet. He is.
He can be very good. I agree.
He is the best guard defender on this planet.
I don't know if he's even going to make.
He's better than Jose Alvarado. He's better than Marcus Smart. He is the best and most pesky defender in the NBA who is a guard. He's the best, especially on the perimeter, dude. It's just his size, 6'5". He's massive, dude. He's giant for a guard. But I digress. Look, this team is built off of like a bunch of essential role players that every single team would have. We can put together a package that no one else can.
Yeah, I think what it boils down to, Doc, is they have a lot of draft capital. I don't necessarily think certain teams care too much about draft capital. There's a degree to which maybe a team can't refuse, but you also have to take into account that Ainge is kind of greedy with some of this draft stock. And he probably wouldn't be willing to give 10 first rounds for De'Aaron Fox.
I don't think you'd need to.
But I don't think that one's super realistic.
2 seconds, Jordan Clarkson, and then like 2 other players.
I would want to see a team that's kind of on the fritz, maybe with a player that they're not super sure, or maybe they're kind of failing and they just don't have a core. You know, maybe they
I got one. I got one for you. You ready? Okay, why not Dylan Brooks?
Because I don't think
better than a starter. He's a great perimeter defender. He's not a star at all, but he'll set the tone on defense. I mean, we could even say Fred VanVleet as well. He has not made an all-star game in Lord knows how long. He has a ring, but the Rockets are not where they expected to be. The Rockets at the beginning of the season, per their GM, Raphael, I can't remember his last name. He said, no, we have enough young talent. We're trying to win now. They're trying to compete, and they have not been able to.
Yeah, I think that a more alluring prospect to me is I think that the Rockets could be willing to give off some of their players. They got a lot of young talent. They are trying to win, not winning the best, but I think their core pieces are people like Şengün.
Yeah, and if you can give them veteran players in return, right? Like, let's say it's during the trade deadline, okay? And we want Fred VanVleet. And if I'm the Utah front office, remember, no trades have taken place, and I go, okay, hey, Houston, we'll give you Jordan Clarkson, we'll give you Kelly Olynyk, we'll give you Ochai Agbaji, and we'll give you a first-round draft pick and 2 seconds for Fred VanVleet.
Yeah.
Are you going to give it to me?
I think they would be willing to do that. I think that's a possibility since they have Amen Thompson that they probably want to mold into that point guard position.
That's what I mean, man. Like, the Jazz can put before this trade deadline, like, especially with what was reported to, like, everyone wanted Kelly Olynyk. Like, the Jazz are establishing a culture where it's very easy for you to come here if you were considered a bust at one point in time. You can come here and rejuvenate your career. That's what the Jazz are. Look at Colin. Look at everyone on this team besides the guys that we just drafted. Even Jordan Clarkson was rotting on the bench with Cleveland, and we traded Dante Exum for him. That's still the greatest. Oh my gosh.
That's I think a first round.
I think it was straight up, dude. I think it was Exum for Clarkson, and that was like the greatest fleece of like Utah Jazz history, honestly.
Well, Doc, what about thinking back at the Rockets? What about Jalen Green? Someone who's kind of struggled to have his identity, hasn't shot very well. Yeah, maybe fits that mold of you turn this guy who's a top draft pick in his year into somebody special. Would the Jazz go after him?
I love
a good player, not a star player.
I mean, I think that he could play well next to Keontae George. Yeah, I mean, dude, I would take that. I would like if you could get Green at a price that was acceptable. Absolutely, dude.
You think that could have been potentially the guy that Tony Jones was talking about?
I think that the possibilities are endless when we think about it. I mean, like, I have another one for you. What about Anfernee Simons, dude?
Like, yeah, I think he's like Sexton a little bit. Maybe better than Sexton.
He's better than Sexton. He's way better than Sexton. Unfortunately, like, that's just the truth of it. He's younger, he's better, he's bigger. He knows how to get buckets. That much bigger. But I think he is. I think he's Sexton is what, 6 foot, and then Simons I think is 6'3". He's got 3 inches on him.
No, let's see.
I think Simons could have been a player. I mean, dude, for all we know, it could have been CJ McCollum. You know? But that's the fun behind it. I don't know if I'd go for CJ. I personally think that this player, whoever they were, was high profile. And was definitely going to be a shocker. And I think this is the kind of moves that I would be trying to do if I were the Jazz front office. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we're not going to keep all these picks. I think that's just common knowledge, right? Like, we're not going to keep all of them.
Let's hope so.
We're going to use some to trade for a player somewhere down the line. Especially a player that we think can help us win right now. Because we have the capital to do it. And, you know, the last thing that the Utah Jazz front office wants to do is really cause issues with Lauri Markkanen. We know, thanks to Andy Larson, who is a great beat writer, honestly. I got a lot of respect for the beat writers here in Utah. Really love their work, especially because they're just hustling and grinding so we can read articles every single day. Like, shout out to everyone who covers the Utah Jazz and writes either online or for the local paper. We love you guys. But we know that Lauri was not happy with the state of our team. That's the last guy you want to make unhappy. Do you know what I mean? So I could see the Jazz in the offseason pursuing another high-profile guy that would be out of left field, but would work well next to Lauri Markkanen. Who, by the way, even in our loss against the Heat, very competitive. He put up probably his best numbers, man, with 25 points and then 6 assists and I think 4 rebounds. Not really great on the rebounding end, but 6 assists. I'm almost positive that's like a career high for our dude. So he's moving the ball. Keontae George also looked really good. I thought Hendricks looked good. I thought Sensabaugh looked good.
Did you say you thought Markkanen looked good?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. He shot 5 for 15.
Yeah, he didn't have the best shooting night, but he moved the ball better than he ever had.
That is something
before.
he's improved upon, and that makes me happy.
Look, I would much rather have him get us 25 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds versus 28 points, 2 assists, and like 12 rebounds. I would love to see him facilitate more. That is the next step of his evolution, and I think he's been trying to do it. I love it. Why do you? So just because of his shooting, you thought he had a bad night? What? Yeah, that's fair. He did not shoot the best. What about KG though? Another great like shooting night, especially from 3, like 6 of 14. That's not bad, man.
Yeah, he is looking pretty good. It's his second 30-point night, I think, of the season, and I think we have something special. It's going to be fun to see him develop, especially in these final games of the season where he's going to have more opportunities.
Yeah, you heard he set the record for most threes made by a rookie a few games ago when he shot 9. Was that was against Golden State, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, Steph Curry gave him a shout out. Apparently, he said, "Okay, shooter." I love that. I know that's a hype moment right there. Guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Full Court Press podcast. We're your hosts, Doc D and JD. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Full Court Press NBA podcast. For the full podcast, click the link below and subscribe for more hoops content.